Good morning and welcome to the Global Progressive Forum. We have just had a 3-day event. This is our final day in which progressive leaders and thinkers from around the world are setting out their vision for a sustainable, inclusive and equitable decade for the future. We have heard incredible panels with incredible speakers such as Madeleine Albright, Michelle Bachelet, Enrico Letta. This is the final day. We are going to talk today about women and gender equality, about how to get the next generation involved and empowered in the session on new politics. And of course, we will talk about climate justice and the new Green Deal. And we will finish by talking about a new social contract for inclusive and sustainable recovery worldwide. But first, as always, we are going to start off today with the news of the day. I am joined here in the European Parliament by two members of European Parliament, Eva Kaili from Greece and Tanja Fajon from Slovenia. Good morning. Hello, Tanja. I can see you already. Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning. Good morning from Ljubljana.
How are you doing? Glad to have you.
I'm doing pretty well. Busy as every day, but yeah, it's happy to talk to you.
Me too. You've probably been following the Global Progressive Forum throughout the last 3 days. We will talk a little bit about what's going on in the news today because, of course, we're interested in making things better for the next decade. You sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee at the European Parliament, which is very relevant since we're having a global discussion. Can you tell us a little bit about your day-to-day or anything interesting that's happening in your committee at the moment?
Yes, indeed, I'm following a lot to Foreign Affairs Committee, especially the region that I'm coming from, Western Balkans. This is definitely high on the agenda because we are going through very, I would say, challenging times. In many countries, we see a brain drain, younger generation living because they are losing hopes of their European future. Also, what is happening on the side of the EU governments is at stake because when we discuss about enlargement to the Western Balkans, there is a question of our credibility. We know that there are North Macedonia, Albania, they met all the criteria, but the EU governments cannot find a political compromise to start the accession talks. So people are losing hope, same goes for Kosovo, where the country met criteria long ago, many years ago, but we haven't delivered a visa-free regime for the citizens of Kosovo. And I can name it. We have a big destabilization ongoing in Bosnia and Herzegovina currently, where there are some nationalistic tensions of secession, and these are all countries that went 20, 30 years ago through bloody wars, and that is why it is a very fragile, a lot of instability politically, economically, going through heavy health situation with pandemic as everywhere. But what I'm mostly concerned is this lack of consensus on the side of European governments, how to approach further in the process of the enlargement. And I'm personally convinced that these countries are part of Europe. We have to bring them closer through the necessary reforms as we have common challenges, global challenges we are discussing today, where we can fight them only when we stand united and strong.
Union is united in diversity, so I'm sure you agree that they need to be helped on their path. I think we do not yet have Eva. No, so we will continue with you, Tanja, for now. I'd like to know what your first item of news is for the day.
Yes, as I'm coming from Slovenia, I'm of course closely following what is happening in our countries in the region. So what I was very appealed was that the former Austrian Chancellor Kurz lost immunity. It was first it's about the recent political developments in Austria in connection with how now former Chancellor Sebastian Kurz, who resigned last month over accusations that he used public money to bribe pollsters and journalists. And the Austrian parliament yesterday voted to take away his immunity. And this is something I think what is very important to prove our citizens that the transparency in politics is really very important. that also politicians, have to face the justice, because what we today face also as a big challenge in my country is the lack of confidence on the side of our citizens, the lack of confidence in political elites, in institutions, in democracy, in the rule of law, and this is at stake in many of our countries. So I would like to see this standard in other EU countries, and as I said, also in my country, Slovenia.
That is indeed very important, because we can only operate with trust with our citizens if we feel like the system is just for all. And actually, a few of the topics on the Progressive Forum have been about that, about equality at every level. We looked at a very interesting panel also on access to resources. There was also one about tax justice. So of course, justice when it comes to corruption is also very important. What is your second item of news that you've picked out for us today?
I don't want to sound over pessimistic, but it's in a way also encouraging news, though we were following it last few weeks or even months with a big concern. Now, it's connecting to a devastated story of refugees on the Polish-Belarus border. It is just impossible to ignore the ongoing catastrophe that is using human lives as a weapon in front of our eyes. And despite the unacceptable acts from both sides, from Belarusian and Polish sides, or authorities, their ignorance and non-compliance with the international legal obligations to grant the right to asylum, today we can read the sort of compromise was finally reached. Poland confirmed that the illegal border camp is cleared at the border, as people were taken to shelters on a Belarusian side. But at least now, as the winter is coming, families with young children, women that were really there in unhuman circumstances at the border, are taken to some shelters and warm places. Meanwhile, more than 400 Iraqis were flown home after on first repatriation flight since the human crisis began, and the latest moves are being seen as a sign that the country's disputed leader Lukashenko, accused of orchestrating the crisis, is now keen to defuse it. Now, this was a very necessary move, so this little, if I say, breakthrough, but I would still like to emphasize that Polish deliberate blocking of NGOs, of journalists, even of refusing the aid of Frontex or EASO at the border is somehow questionable. All these associations, NGOs, they were really trying to help starving and freezing people and children, and that should be somehow really condemned. So this is not Europe and does not represent our values. But we have to, whenever we discuss migration issues, refugee issues, we have so diverse opinion and lack of confidence. And I wish to see that we really have in mind that we are speaking about human beings and that every human life counts.
Thank you very much, Tanya. And it's very, I mean, it is, as you say, it's a sad story, but it's very relevant right now. What's happening at the Belarusian-Polish border is only the latest game in the migration saga that Europe has been facing and the world at large. And I know that you yourself have positioned yourself in the AFET committee on the matter several times. We also had a panel with Commissioner Johansson yesterday on the issue of migration. Before we move on to your next item, I'd like to expand a little bit on what you would think would be an equitable solution, if it were up to you, if you could just get all the EU member states to agree on a common policy on migration, what would be your progressive ideal on this?
Look, we have had several discussions how to reform and establish our European common migration and asylum policy. once we had this big wave of migrants crossing our countries in 2015, 2016, the Commission came up with a proposal, big legislative packages, how to share solidarity in Europe, that the countries with the outside border are not those that have to have the biggest challenge and problem, how to make asylum procedures elsewhere, not at the borders, but in first place, how to open more safe and legal paths to Europe for those that are entitled to get international protection or asylum status, and how on the other hand fight illegal networks or criminal associations that are human trafficking with children and women and gaining a lot of money. We haven't been in a position to establish a common European migration and asylum policy, even though in the Parliament we actually adopted all the packages, but there was really no consensus in the hands of the European governments. Why? Because I think a lot of politicians were behaving very populistic. They didn't have a broader Europe in mind, but they were really abusing the topic for a domestic political discussion. What is today a biggest challenge is that there is no lack of confidence among the EU governments how to help each other, how to boost or strengthen our solidarity in Europe to help people in need. It's a very politicized and very abused topic that I strongly believe it's not nor on the left political forces, progressive forces, or right political forces, or any color of political forces to find a solution, but it's a global challenge. And Europe can only solve it together, or the whole world have to tackle migration challenges, because Europe was always a continent of migration, and it will always be. So we need a common policy and common answers on that.
Thank you very much, Tanya. You're absolutely right. It's a very complex problem, not one we will solve overnight, but that shouldn't stop us from having these conversations and from reminding people that on the other side, we're talking about human beings and about lives, not just pawns that move from left to right. I do believe you have a good news for us as well.
Yeah, I do have a good news that is related to my country, and this is about it's a consciously I have chosen the news, as our media atmosphere is over polluted nowadays with mostly negative, discouraging news. And the headline reads that Kozjansko regional park in Slovenia, a very green area in the east of my country, is this year's recipient of Melina Mercury International Prize. I believe you see it now on your screens, and which is awarded under the auspices of UNESCO in the field of protection and management of cultural landscapes. So the award, which is given every 2 years, will be given for the first time to Slovenia, more precisely to this park, beautiful park, with the official ceremony on Monday in Paris. And this is a sign of immersed care of nature in our country, which is a very green country with a lot of Alps, with the sea. So for anyone, if I make a little propaganda, it's beautiful tourism here, but for people that really love nature, and Slovenes are very protective to our environment.
That is a great piece of news, and congratulations. I have been to Slovenia and to Ljubljana and the environs, so I can only amplify what you said and encourage people to visit Slovenia. And I'm thrilled to hear that there is a Melina Mercouri Prize, because she was a Minister of Culture of Greece that was very well loved and who cared immensely about preserving our heritage. So thank you very much, Tanya. This is a very nice note to end the news on. Before we move on to Eva, I'd like to ask you what your progressive dream is, because the motto of the GPF, as you know, is "If we can dream it, we can do it." It's an adaptation of the Walt Disney quote, and I'd like to know what your progressive dream would be for the next 10 to 15 years.
When you sent me this question about the dreams, I couldn't resist to remember our first president of Slovenia when Slovenia became independent country. At that time, we were really united in solidarity in our dreams. And Milan Kučan at that time quoted, "Today dreams are allowed, tomorrow is a new day," which brought us to our responsibilities, how to build our future. Why I'm saying that? Because we are today maybe also at some crossroad of our European values, of our democracies, of our freedoms. So we are losing a little bit a strategic goal where European Union is heading. So that's why I say, yes, today dreams are allowed, but tomorrow is a new day, and we are all together responsible how this tomorrow will look like. And I wish, of course, that the European Union would be strong back in basic values: solidarity, equality, rights for everyone, women, vulnerable groups, dignity, our public health systems, public school systems, so that will be Europe a place where people would feel safe and that they would have a vision, especially for young generation, to build their careers, to get their jobs, education, prosperous future, and yes, digital, green environment, all that what we have on the agenda, and also bring back credibility to European politics.
So a little bit of everything that the Global Progressive Forum is actually dealing with.
Yes.
I'd like to stay with you while we and look at the program for today very briefly one more time. As you talked about gender equality, and we will have Zita Gurmai from the Party of European Socialist Women, along with Connie Reuter from the Progressive Alliance, joining us at 1:30 today. After that, we will talk about women and gender equality in the panel "Women Are the Change." Following that, we will look at new politics, how to involve the new generation and galvanize their political agency. In the afternoon at 4 p.m., a new Green Deal for climate justice, very fitting, very topical, not just because we've just had COP26, but because we have, as many speakers have reminded us throughout the last 3 days, a climate emergency on our hands at the moment. And the final panel of the day will be on a new social contract for inclusive and sustainable recovery, because we need to have better laws in place that protect workers all around and have a contract of trust between employers and workers. I'd like to ask you, Tanya, is there one in particular that you're looking forward to tuning into? What would you recommend our viewers watch?
Since I'm a woman and since I miss women on high positions in politics or in business, and knowing that pandemic also deteriorated some rights of women and affected them strongly, being mothers, being housewives, making household stand during the children being at home, working school on distance, and at the same time trying to make their career. So a lot of women also lost jobs, also lost their rights. So I would be very interested in hearing what women have to say. It's not self-obvious all what we have achieved so far in our women fight for equality. So maybe that is the topic, because I would wish to see also many women. We have a lot of knowledge and potential, but it's still very much, at least on high positions in political life, very much man-ruled governance.
Have you, just stay on that, since you brought it up, and since you are a woman who has achieved a lot in your political career, have you found it a struggle in your case to get to where you are?
I wouldn't say it's a classical struggle, but I miss more women. I always try to fight for equality, parity in the positions. In politics, at least now when I'm more engaged also in a domestic political environment in my country, I see that quite often, rules were created by men. So women have a bit different approach, and it would be nice that we would have, in a way, equal to each other, well represented. It often happens I'm at the meetings surrounded with only men, and this is not a good equality. But it's one part. I didn't have myself a big challenge, but I would like to encourage that we develop really proper conditions that women can work without, being stigmatized or without taking away their rights, or even you feel now with social media, it's a lot of chauvinism or sexism comments from people which we don't deserve. So I wish to see more equality here and more free space or free open-minded space, that women would be encouraged to go also on high leading positions, not only in politics but also in a business environment. But of course, apart from that, this is maybe a minor problem. Much bigger problem today is also violence against women, that during the pandemic, I hear that the data are really worrying. It was much more violence in the families that were close behind the four walls, and women don't dare to speak. And this is a serious challenge also we have to address.
Thank you, Tanya. And in fact, our panel at 1:30 with Zita Gurmai and Connie Reuter will look at exactly this, a campaign to end violence against women. Thank you very much, Tanya, for sharing the news of the day with us. Unfortunately, we were not able to connect Eva, but it's been a very interesting discussion. You brought up some extremely topical points of news, which I'm sure our viewers agree with. And we will see everyone back for the continuation of the Global Progressive Forum, Day 3, the last day. Tune in at 1:30 once more. Thank you, and see you later.